Okay, I'm back and I just finished part 2 of the new Casey Anthony documentary that dropped on Peacock today, Where the Truth Lies. And whoo, all right, let's get into it. On part 2, Casey comes in hot with her version of events leading up to Caylee Anthony's death. Casey says that the night before was just a normal night, and the morning of Kaylee's death, she woke up and she got Caylee some breakfast, but Casey herself wasn't feeling so great and she wanted to lay back down. So after getting Kaylee's breakfast, she put Caylee in bed with her and she closed the door and put the TV on, and of course she had Caylee in bed with her. And Casey says that she has always been a light sleeper. She's been a light sleeper her entire life. And Casey says that she's been a light sleeper her entire life because she is used to someone opening the door while she's asleep, and she's used to being on alert, especially with her child lying next to her in bed, which was part of the reason why Caylee slept in bed with Casey so often, according to Casey. Casey says that she thought she locked the door to the bedroom before she fell back asleep, but that maybe she, in all actuality, did not. Casey pointed out that her dad, George, was home when she fell back asleep and that she remembers that she had been asleep for a while when she was awoken by George shaking her, asking her where Caylee was, which didn't make sense to her because she thought that Caylee was lying next to her in the bed. Casey says that Caylee would never just leave the room without telling her, even if it was just to go to the bathroom, so she immediately gets up and starts looking for Caylee. She goes on to say that after she got up, she started looking for her in Caylee's room, which happened to be Casey's brother Lee's old bedroom, as well as the garage, and then she goes outside to start looking for her, and she's nowhere out there, and she said it didn't make any sense to her where Caylee could possibly be. Casey is then asked if she ever checked the pool when she went outside to look for Caylee, and Casey says that she never had to. She said that by the time she came back around the house, George was standing there with Caylee soaking wet in his arms, and that George handed her Caylee's body and said, "This is all your fault." And Casey said she remembers collapsing with Caylee in her arms to the ground. She described Caylee's body as being heavy and cold, and she said that she was hysterical with Caylee in her lap, not knowing what to do, when George softened his tone and told her that it was going to be okay, she was going to be okay, and she really wanted to believe George when he said that. Casey says she doesn't remember how long she was outside, but that George at some point took Caylee from her and walked back into the house carrying Caylee, and she doesn't know what he did after that. She just knows that she felt broken, numb, confused, and hopeful that Caylee was going to be okay, like George said she was going to be, allegedly. Following this, on that same day, Casey says that she went to her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's house, where she stayed for 3 weeks out of the 31-day period between this occurring and authorities being notified. And that throughout the 3 weeks that she was staying with Tony, she was acting normal because she claims that that is what her father George told her to do. And both roommates told police that Casey was acting normal the entire time she was there. Casey said that pics of her partying online throughout the 3 weeks that she was staying at boyfriend Tony's house surfaced, and that she wasn't actually partying. If you notice, there's no alcoholic beverages in her hand or anything like that. She was actually working, helping her boyfriend Tony to promote those clubs. Going on to say that she believed throughout that entire time that her daughter Caylee was still alive, and that George told her that Caylee was still alive, and she did what George told her to do, which was continue to act normal, and she did what she needed to do to survive. Casey also stated that she was in contact with George, her father, daily during the 31 days between whatever happened to Kaylee and the authorities being notified. And she said that she continued to ask George daily if Kaylee was okay and when would she be able to see her again. And she claims that George told her that Kaylee was okay and that they would be reunited soon. And she says, when you fear someone and you're conditioned to say and do things, you revert to that even when you're an adult and even in bad situations. Casey said that she held the mentality that Kaylee was okay and everything was going to be okay even while she was in jail, saying that she still remained hopeful from her jail cell. And they show a clip of her talking to her mother and father, George and Cindy, and she gives feedback watching herself from 14 years ago. And she said that she was looking at George throughout that phone call because she wanted to believe him so badly. And even though she probably knew deep down what had happened and that nothing was okay, she really just did not want to accept that. And she held on to that hope and continued to believe that everything was okay until December 2008 when Kaylee's remains were discovered. At that point, she starts talking about finding out how she found out that Kaylee was in fact deceased. And she said that while she was in jail, they brought her into a room and the news was on, and she sat down and she saw it splashed across the news that remains believed to be Kaylee Anthony were found, and she says she just lost it. And they show the footage of that from the jail. And she admits, she said, yes, I was naive. Yes, I was dumb. The whole time I thought there was still a chance that she was okay. Here's where it gets interesting. She's asked whether or not she believes that Kaylee could have potentially drowned in the pool. And her response is that drowning in the pool is not possible. In most scenarios, it would be plausible, but not here. And she says that the ladder wasn't on the pool, which is the only way in and out of the pool. Now, in a previous episode where I talked about this documentary coming out, I talked about how this statement just really threw me. And in the YouTube version of this podcast, there were all of these idiotic comments about the ladder was removable. No fucking shit. It's an above ground pool. I thought it was obvious and clearly common sense that above ground pools have a removable ladder. That's how you get in and out. That wasn't what struck me about her statement that there wasn't a ladder. What struck me about her statement that there wasn't a ladder was the fact that that was her defense at trial. Her defense at trial was that somehow Kaylee got out through the sliding glass doors, which they have picture proof that she was able to open, and that she then crawled up the ladder and got into the pool and accidentally drowned. That was quite literally her defense at her trial in 2011. So my shock about her new revelation in this docuseries that there was no ladder was never a debate on whether or not there was a removable ladder. I felt like that was common sense. It was the shock that her defense was literally that she got out and crawled up the ladder and accidentally drowned, and now all of a sudden there was no ladder on the pool. In Casey's version of events, she explains the use of that defense as it being Cindy's idea, and the defense just went with it. And she said that the defense told her that they had to tell the jury something she couldn't just not know. And she is then asked about the obvious. If she didn't drown, if you don't believe her to have drowned, then why would her body have been soaking wet as you claimed she was when you claim that George handed her to you in the backyard? In response to that, Casey says that she was not the only one home and that she is not outright accusing her father George of murder, but she doesn't think it was an accidental death in the pool. And she also stated she wanted to know why he didn't call 911, but doesn't explain why she didn't call 911. She just states that she feels guilty for failing to have protected her daughter, Kaylee, and for continuing to fail her by not bringing up the allegations of abuse against her father and brother to the attention of other people sooner. And in failing to do so, protecting the person whom she believes is responsible for the death of her daughter, Kaylee, and that is her father, George. So it should come as no surprise that in episode 2, they delve into the accusations of sexual abuse perpetrated against Casey by her father, George, and her brother, Lee. So on that note, trigger warning, because we are going to be talking about the allegations of sexual assault that Casey has made in this documentary against her brother and her father. Casey states that when she was 8, she remembers her father starting to slide into bed with her, and she would pretend to be asleep while he touched her, and she has a memory of him moving hair off of her neck, and he would put his hands down her back and under her shirt, and she remembers the first time he put his hands down her pants and slid from the back to the front. She goes on to state that she was told that she was safe and okay and that this was a special time. And she said that she remembers a few times where she tried to fight back, but it's not like she could push him off of her. She even said that he put a pillow over her face several times and claims that he would smother her on the nights where she would ask him not to do this, and she would later wake up knowing it had happened again. She said that she was just a little girl, but that she was Daddy's special little girl at night. The documentary then goes on to try to substantiate the claims that Casey has made against her father and brother. One of the ways that the documentary tries to substantiate the claims that Casey has made against her father and brother is by referencing letters that Casey wrote a fellow inmate during the time that she was in custody. In part 2 of this documentary, Robin Adams, the fellow inmate that Casey Anthony was writing these letters to, as well as the letters that Casey Anthony wrote her, make an appearance. But that's not the first time that these letters have made an appearance, because if you're not new to the Casey Anthony case, well, then neither are these letters, because back between 2008 and 2011, these letters were actually leaked to the public because they were jail communication and privy to public access. But the point in the documentary bringing up these letters is that it shows that Casey was referencing the abuse long before the defense was using it as part of her defense, and they are using the letters as a way to try to substantiate her claims by saying that she was telling a fellow inmate this, and she was doing it before anyone else knew about it, not knowing that others were going to find out, or that it would ever be used as part of her defense in the 2011 trial. The documentary then tries to further substantiate these claims by bringing in medical professionals that actually worked with Casey Anthony back between the years of 2008 and 2011, preparing to go to trial. All of which said that they believe Casey Anthony's allegations to be true, and they even said that they all evaluated Casey and there is nothing wrong with her. She is not a sociopath or a psychopath or any of the other things that the media continued to say about her and still does continue to say about her to this day. They said that there is no medical basis for those claims. They also bring up the fact that Casey's ex-fiance Jesse testified during the 2011 trial that Casey had opened up to him and talked to him about the sexual abuse that she claims her brother perpetrated against her when she was just a kid. And Casey stated that she only opened up to Jesse about the sexual abuse that she alleges against her brother because she had already forgiven her brother, and that made it easier for her to talk to him about that. But she never told anyone about the allegations against George because she said that was much harder for her. Casey even goes on to say that after the birth of Kaylee, she had worked up enough courage to tell her mother, Cindy, about the alleged abuse that she was claiming that her brother Lee perpetrated against her. And Casey says that her mother's exact words were, so that's why you're a whore. Casey said that she didn't tell anyone about the abuse that she alleges that her father George perpetrated against her until she was away from her family in the jail cell and she felt like she could finally open up and tell someone about that abuse. And Casey states several times that she deeply regrets not speaking up about the abuse sooner. The rest of part 2 is really just going over things that we all already know, such as the two detectives going back to the area where Caylee Anthony's remains were found and discussing the conditions in which those remains were found, as well as how all of the items found with Caylee Anthony's remains linked back to the Anthony household. The remainder of information in part 2 of this documentary is really just the defense team going over why they stand by Casey Anthony, why they say that she is innocent and didn't do this, and they go over different aspects of the trial and evidence and things like that. Which we can get into more depth and detail about that later if you guys want to, but it's nothing new. So I'm going to go and watch part 3 so I can come back and give you guys the skinny. So I'll see you guys in a couple hours.